Hey guys, now we're going to start reading Woolf, and the great thing about that is because she is a kind of modern American, her writing's going to be a lot clearer because she's writing for an audience just like us, so things will be a little bit easier to grasp. Well, I think so anyway. What are we going to do today? Well, we're going to establish some background knowledge and then explore why Woolf argues that a dichotomous view of justification for moral action is false. Now, all that is just wordy at the moment, but throughout the summary I'm about to provide you, it'll make a lot of sense. What are the three small goals we need to achieve in order to reach that overall goal? Well, we need to do what we always do in philosophy, which is learn about new terms, define them, and of course later on apply them and interrelate them with other key terms. But also, uniquely to this video, we need to introduce ourselves to concepts that we'll need to understand Woolf's writing. So what are some basic concepts before we launch into it? And then, once we've done that, let's start looking at the contents of Woolf's introduction to her philosophical expose, for want of a better term. So can you please write these down and then score yourself out of 4 on each of them. And once you've done that, move on to the APK. And it's a pretty simple APK this time. Just draw a picture of yourself doing something that you're passionate about. That's it. Cheers. Okay. Well, it's fair to say that as an introduction, so I'm not actually beginning her introduction yet, but just trying to introduce her to some of the concepts. What Susan Woolf is trying to do is explore two commonly held philosophical beliefs, or general beliefs in general that aren't maybe necessarily philosophical, about motivation and justification for moral action. And the first one we'll call egoism, which is a simple concept. It's about doing what you do to maximize your own welfare, individual welfare. And the other one, for now, we're just going to say it's unnamed. I put normative ethics here because I think when you actually do the reading, you'll find there's allusion to Kant and other moral systems. And we kind of get a sense through reading Woolf that what she's really referring to is other kind of moral systems that call us to consider something outside of ourselves in order to justify or know or to motivate us to do moral actions. Okay? So take a note. Your note should really say something along the lines of egoism versus something external but unnamed, okay? But she believes that we're leaving something out, and these things that we're leaving out are called reasons for love. Can you write the note? Now, when she says reasons for love, she's not really talking about just loving someone else. She thinks that's really important, by the way, but she's talking about anything that intensely drives that kind of love or passion you have for something, okay? So Susan Woolf is aiming here to kind of clarify what these reasons for love actually are. That's the whole point of her essay. It's a very famous essay, and people do regard it quite highly. And she's trying to clarify how these reasons for love add extra meaning to our lives. Take a note. So, again, she goes through and she describes two accounts of... Oop, we slipped away then, didn't we? She goes through and she tries to look at two accounts of this kind of motivation, and also we could say justification, right? The first one is what we will call egoism, or for want of a better term, we might call it rational egoism. There are many different terms. And the second one, well, the textbook is saying not yet named. However, it's probably better to think about this as a call to moral duty or a call to moral action that is outside of yourselves, for want of a better term, okay? And a classic example would be that of Kant's categorical imperative, okay? And when we just consider these two areas of motivation, or these two areas of justification for moral actions as well, so they motivate us to do moral things, rational egoism or the call, but they also are justifications for what we do. We're referring to this as a dualistic model of how we account for justification and motivation for moral actions. Okay, take a note. So she wants to argue that perhaps there might be an even higher motivation. And by the way, when I put these insane gym junkies up here, I'm doing it really to take the mickey out of myself because, as you all know, I've fallen in love with going to the gym. Not quite here yet, but, you know, I do want to point out that this is a bit extreme and I'm hoping you're having a bit of a chuckle to yourself. So she says perhaps there's an even higher motivation that is calling us along, something that is outside or maybe transcends the dualistic model that we've used to explain moral justification and moral motivation. And she is here to inspect that, to have a look at it. And what she's noticed, and this is something that's really clear, this is why I keep saying moral motivation and moral justification. She's basically saying that she's going to find prescriptive, which is where we basically come up with the word justification because we're prescribing that you do this. So she suggests two prescriptive models of motivation that match the previously discussed motivations that we talked about before. So when I said egoism, that was a kind of description of what might motivate us to do well. So when we talk about prescription, we're talking about the justification for what we should do, that is moral, or justification for our actions. And again, she's here to explore the two. So I'll just make this really clear. Is it prescriptive? I don't think it's prescriptive. I think it's prescriptive. Let's have a look. Nope, it's pre. Sorry. Let's get mixed up. So basically, by prescriptive, we're saying this is the justification for the action, and by descriptive, we're saying this is the motivation for the action. Because prescriptive says this is what you should do in the future, descriptive says this is why people do what they do. Take a note. Now, of course, you don't need to be a genius to figure this out. Oh, and I should probably tell you that I've just jumped the gun. From here, where we say a false dichotomy, we're actually start talking about her intro. So we've actually launched into her introduction. Beforehand, we were talking about the prior knowledge. Now we're up to section 1 of her writing, and we're actually talking about what it is that she's actually writing, okay? So just take a note. We start here. And the first thing she does is she says we've got the first one, which would be individualism, and the unnamed one. And then she moves into describing that these are motivations for actions, and we could call this the dualistic model. Then she moves along and says, well, there are actually prescriptive descriptions for motivation, which are about why we should do things, and they end up becoming justifications. All right? And that's where we are at the moment. So she basically says the first one, again, is some kind of egoism. We're going to call it rational egoism, which is basically this idea that a person's action is morally prescribed or justified, for want of a better term, if it rationally, that's why I've circled the rational numbers, maximizes your welfare. Can you take a note? So an action is morally prescribed if it rationally maximizes your individual welfare, not the welfare of a community, but the welfare of you as an individual. Take a note. Now the second one is more about a call to moral action from outside of yourself. That's probably the best way to describe it. And at the moment we're going to say that's unnamed. But if you think about Kant's categorical imperative, where ethical logic is calling you to action, you know, it's those kind of systems plus many, many, many more. Maybe Aristotle's virtue. These kind of external compelling reasons that don't have to do with your own self-interest, but they're kind of external calls to like a duty or to moral action that we're really talking about when we talk about the unnamed motivation, or in this case, the unnamed prescription. Now we don't actually know what it's called, but we do know that it's an impersonal, so it's got nothing to do with yourself, which is about something outside of yourself. And the way that she describes it in a nice, clear way, she says it's a call to moral action from the perspective of the universe outside of you. Take a note. Now, she acknowledges that these are both equally compelling calls to action, and they're actually quite important. But what she does also argue is that, well, it appears they can't be the only, while they appear to be the underpinnings for what's right or wrong, for justifications for what's right or wrong, they do not necessarily cover everything. They leave something out, just like a bad diet. They leave something out. So we need to find another form of motivation, another area of motivation that fills the gaps, that explains the right or wrong, okay? And she believes that these actions are related to reasons for love. Take a note. Now, when she talks about reasons for love, she's usually talking about two different types of reasons for love. The first one is interpersonal reasons for love, interrelational reasons for love. So love of family, friends, people you care about, or even being compassionate for somebody who's less fortunate. So interrelational reasons for love, she thinks are really important. But there's also another kind of love, and it's a love of kind of like a hobby or a passion. So you might be a guitar player and you might love playing the guitar, right? So that is just another reason for love to do something. You just do it because you love doing it. And she's arguing that, reasons for love, they can never be fully reduced to rational egoism or self-interest. Take a note. In fact, then she goes on to tell us that these reasons for love and what they are and how they work, that's the main aim of her essay. She wants to define these reasons for love, and she also wants to outline and map out their characteristics. Okay? Take a note. She then goes on to say, look, not all actions done in the name of love are good. Sometimes they are misguided or misplaced. But she is concerned more with defending the actions or the reasons for love that are positive and are worthy of meaning and worthy of you. So she wants to defend positive actions that are motivated by reasons for love and worthy actions. And also, from her point of view, right, she wants to point out that these actions motivated by reasons for love, they're important, they're a priority. Even if they don't maximise the welfare of an individual or a community, they are just as important. And you're going to find out that's because they add meaning to our lives. Okay? They create meaningful life. So, let's go back to our success criteria. Have we named and defined key terms? Reasons for love should be there. Rational egoism should be there. The dichotomous model or the dualistic model should be there. There should be many different terms. Have we introduced ourselves to concepts needed to understand Wolff's argument? Yep. The dualistic model and the idea of reasons for love and the idea of rational egoism. Rational egoism is a concept that was held or believed or used as a justification for action even before she started writing this, all right? So that's important to know. And did we outline the contents of Wolff's introduction? Of course we did. We talked about the fact that she's identified another area for motivation for our actions, which could be prescriptive and morally prescriptive. And these can't be reduced to self-interest in any way. And even if they don't maximise the welfare of our community or individuals, they're still equally important. And her goal is to outline the characteristics of these reasons for love and give them a more clear definition. So if you've got that, you've got it all, head to the exam-like question for the summary, and then we'll go through the reading next. Cheers.